Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. A few people are still joining us, but let's go ahead and start here. Thank you for joining us for our session today, Publishing Student Writing Using Authentic Writing to Motivate and Inspire. Before we begin, I would like to turn your attention to your controls at the bottom of the screen. So on the bottom, you'll see a chat icon. We would really like to encourage you to chat with each other, share resources, and just post comments in that section. I'd also like to point you to your Q&A section. So in that section, you will put any questions you have for the presenter, or if you have any technical questions, I can answer those privately. And also, I'd like you to be aware that you can change your view option here in the webinar. All you have to do is go to the top of the screen where it says View Options and click the drop down, and you should be able to exit full screen mode and have a couple other options at your disposal. So with that, I'd like to introduce your presenter today, Ann Meisenzahl. Ann is a curriculum writer and instructor with ACE of Leon County and is a regular presenter at the Florida Literacy Conference and has helped us with many online presentations and projects throughout the years. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to her. Ann?
Hi, Nicole. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my session, Publishing Student Writing, Using Authentic Writing to Motivate and Inspire. I am you're not going to be seeing my face because the camera on my computer is not working very well. So instead, you get to look at me one time. This is me. I am a teacher at Adult and Community Education, as Nicole said. I've been working as a teacher and curriculum writer for probably 35 years now, all told, in different settings. One of my favorite things to do is encourage students to write. I want to share with you today the reasons why I think authentic writing is so important and all kinds of good strategies for helping our students feel comfortable with the writing process and writing for a reason. As I go, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I'll have a couple of times during the course of the presentation when we can stop and field questions or suggestions, ideas, things that you've done in the classroom that you feel good about that you'd like to share as well related to authentic student writing. So let me begin. Many of our students have been discouraged about writing, and part of that is because of the way it's been taught. So much student writing is writing for a test, writing for a grade, writing for the big end of the year tests that determine whether or not they're going to pass. So a lot of times there's pressure as it relates to writing. And of course, we know with the GED, of course, we have to prepare our students for a test as well. I like this cartoon because it's a reminder that sometimes they don't even get that much practice actually writing because they're so busy practicing editing and fixing multiple choice questions. So what we want to encourage is that our students write in a way that's really, really authentic, really useful, and a life skill. Many of our students don't even know why they need to know how to write. Charlie Brown says, do you know why English teachers go to college for 4 years? Mine is, no, I do not know why they go to college for 4 years. Well, Charlie Brown says, then I'll tell you why. So they can make stupid little kids write stupid essays on what they did all stupid summer. And some of our kids have actually had that experience of feeling like writing is torture. For many of our students, writing for a grade has also made them feel like they're not good writers. You know, this poor kid has been practicing writing and all he gets is a C and it's graded, as opposed to the authentic writing that we use in real life. We don't get graded on writing when we're on the job. We just want to communicate and use our writing skills for a purpose. So why should we teach authentic writing in the adult ed adult basic ed, ESOL, or GED classroom. Authentic writing is motivating. It can really motivate our reluctant writers, some of whom come in with lots of baggage. I know all of you have heard students say, I can't write. Before they even put the pencil to the paper to do whatever exercise you have for them to do, oh, no, I can't write. I don't write. I don't want to write. I'm not a good writer. I think I've probably heard it 1,000 times. So we have reluctant writers. Authentic writing can motivate them. It can also help our students see the many purposes of writing. Writing is only for a test as it relates to school. Most of the time in real life, we have real authentic life skill related reasons for writing. Authentic writing gives students tools for communicating their thoughts and feelings. It's an outlet for things that are really important to them and can make them feel connected to the larger world and give them tools for communicating that. And here's the best part, teaching those skills necessary to improve TABE scores and pass the GED is obviously important, but we can do it in a motivating way, in a fun way, and in a way that's meaningful. So what is authentic writing? Authentic writing means writing for a purpose that is meaningful and relevant, connected to things that are important to our students. Authentic writing gives students the opportunity to write for a reason other than for a grade, other than for a test. Authentic writing helps students develop critical thinking skills. Now, we know how important this is to the GED. Those evidence-based questions, those prompts, those are all asking critical thinking questions. The more practice students can get doing exercises that engender those skills, the better they're going to do on that GED essay. So it's a win-win. Authentic writing develops meaningful communication skills that will be useful for the rest of their lives. Authentic writing helps to connect students to the larger world, so they see that people who write in order to communicate, in order to share their ideas and thoughts with an audience, to connect them to the larger world. Authentic writing also helps reduce the stress that students often feel in preparing for the TABE test, and in particular for the GED. It helps them enjoy the process, and at the same time, they're learning all those valuable skills that are going to help them do well in the test. So what I like to do is first start off when I am teaching writing to my students, is first introduce them to the many purposes for writing. Writing is valuable for narrating. It's storytelling. I cannot tell you how many stories about their own lives that students have shared over the course of my career through their writing. And I'll be talking about this later, but of course the Florida Literacy Coalition's essay book that they produce every year, that's so fabulous. It's narration. It's full of the stories and experiences that the students have that are valuable and that they want to share. Short stories, novels, personal narratives, anecdotes, biographies. These are all examples of narrative writing. Authentic writing, one of the purposes of authentic writing is to describe things. These are great exercises to do, exercises related to describing what's going on using words, to use sensory language. It helps to develop vocabulary. It helps students to express themselves in interesting and creative ways. Poetry, personal essays, and stories are rich if they're full of description. It makes writing come alive. I think I skipped a page here. Let's go back. Authentic writing is useful because it helps students explain or inform. One of the most important purposes of writing is to teach. Encyclopedia entries, news reports, instructions informative essays about topics that students have researched. That says Nook reports. I just saw that. It should say book reports. Research papers, recipes, these are all examples of writing to explain or to inform. And I'll be sharing activities with you soon about some of these specific aspects of writing that can be really fun and useful in the classroom, like book reports, not Nook reports. One of the purposes of writing, of course, is to persuade. Persuasive writing convinces the reader of your position, of your opinion. It requires knowledge of the subject, and it can be a powerful tool for change. So obviously, editorials and letters to the editor are examples of persuasive writing, where you communicate in order to express your views and opinions about a topic. Persuasive writing is great practice for the evidence-based writing prompts on the GED. Another really important purpose of writing is to express feelings. Our students, as we know, come in with lots and lots of background experiences. Some have had trouble, some have had a lot of hard times, are going through hard times during the time that we're with them. To give them an opportunity to express their feelings through writing can be very healing, and it can also free them from the distractions that can interfere with learning. Many times in the past, I've started the day with journal writing as a way to kind of get out whatever stresses, anxieties, feelings, fears, anger students might be feeling in order to free their brain for the opportunity to learn. It can also be a wonderful way to give them a chance to reflect and problem solve. Any questions, any thoughts at this point about why authentic writing is valuable for our students, or anybody have any experiences that they might want to share at this point?
We have a couple of comments that the journal writing is a great idea, especially to start the learning time. And just that this is, it's so true that people have negative experiences about writing.
Great, yep. I know all of us who've been in adult education for any period of time have heard those comments from our students, and I'm sure many of us have done journal writing, tried journal writing, and seen how for some students it's a real outlet. It really is a positive experience for them. So I appreciate those comments. So let me at this point give you some examples of some of the authentic writing activities that we've done. And again, as we're going through this, if you have experiences of your own, when we get to the opportunity to chat and share, listeners would too, because I'm sure there are lots of great ideas out there, and these are just a few that I wanted to share. And I will say at the outset that a lot of the ideas I'm going to share with you are incorporated in the ACE GED Life Skills curriculum that I've written for adult and community education in Leon County. This is our website address. It's aceleon.org. /GED Life Skills Curriculum, and in every single unit, I've incorporated writing activities. There's poetry, there's narrative writing, there's lots of responsive writing. I have a section on words of wisdom, where there are quotes that students can respond to. So I would strongly encourage you, if you have any downtime over this summer, to go to our website and check out some of the different units. As you can see, they're all life skill based. They're related to finding a job, keeping a job. Some of them are more directed toward people in correction settings, but they're all applicable in any of our classes. So go ahead and check that out when you have a chance, because there's an incredible amount of writing embedded in these units. So we were talking about journal writing. Journal writing is an opportunity for reflection. for self-expression, for problem solving. I mean, I tell my students, write about something that's bothering you and see if you can come up with some suggestions and solutions for yourself. Journal writing fosters fluency. One thing that I'd be curious to hear what other people think about this, but one thing that I encourage is that journal writing is not something we correct. It's not something that students hand in and we cross out and write suggestions. It's a way of expressing themselves, just like if a friend sent us a letter or a sibling sent us a letter, we wouldn't correct that letter. We would just respond. And we'd respond with love. And that's what we want to do with journal writing. If students choose to share, and I always give them the option of whether or not they want to share, is to genuinely respond to the thoughts that are being expressed. Journal writing can sometimes lead to essays, which they then would type. When they get to that point, of course, we're going to add those because they might be shared or published. But when they're in the journal, they're not corrected. So they help in that way to build confidence, to build fluency, to build a sense of competence. I'm a writer. I just filled 2 whole pages. Now, all of us have to edit our work, so that'll come later. But in terms of journal writing, there's a freedom, I think, that comes from not having that corrected. So one of the handouts that I asked Nicole to share related to this workshop is called Suggestions for Journal Writing in an Unusual Time. And it's something that for those of us who have had to work virtually for the last 2 months, this is something that I shared with my students. I actually ended up mailing letters to some of them who didn't have computers at the time. And in the letter, I sent them a 2-page list of journal writing activities related to the coronavirus time, but are certainly general enough that they could be used throughout in the future. So I had them write, they could choose prompts or questions related to gratitude, related to this time, this unusual time of isolation and quarantine, wishes, dreams, and goals that they have, questions about staying healthy, what do they do to stay healthy, how are they doing, what makes you unique, and lots of questions about their questions, their thoughts, and their beliefs. What I did during this virtual teaching time is I then asked them to, if they had a computer, they had access to email, to type up their essay and then send it to me so that we could edit it together. Then I was able, I have a small class this year of about 14 students, so I was able to compile their writing and put it into an anthology, and I'll share that with you about how we did that. But you could also just share, you know, if you do Zoom conferences with your students, you could screen share their essays so that they could read each other's work and give each other feedback and comments. So there are lots of ways to use journal writing even when we're doing it virtually. Another thing that I have done fairly often in the past is I was able to get donated copies of our local newspaper, or I would print out articles from the paper that I thought would be of interest to our students. And then I would, I have something called a newspaper article summary sheet, and it's in unit 9 of the curriculum, and that I shared with you, the aceleon.org curriculum. And it's an opportunity for them to summarize what they read in the newspaper article, discuss what the supporting arguments were, and then express their opinions about the article. And this, again, it's authentic writing in the sense that it's about real things that are happening in their local community, giving them an opportunity to summarize what they've read, but also to express their opinions about those topics. I have included a book summary sheet in the handouts that I've asked Nicole to upload. And this is just one of the most successful authentic writing experiences we've had. And that is that students have access to tons of books in my classroom. So I hope everybody's familiar with Townsend Press, but they have these beautiful Bluford series, which are fiction books, and they have lots of biographies of famous and important people. So I tell every student that I want them to read a book. I give them that they choose a book of their choice, and then I give them a deadline, which sometimes works and sometimes does not. And then I ask them to complete a book summary, and you'll see that book summary sheet when you open up those documents. And it's a place for students to handwrite their summary of the book, their description of the characters, their description of the setting, and then their opinions about the book, whether they liked it and why. And then I always encourage them then to type up their book summary, share their book summaries with others, so that we're having sort of a book group, in a sense, that they're sharing what they've read with the others in the class. They get up in front of the class and read. And then I also include those book summaries in the writing anthologies that we do at the end. There are any number of great lists of topics for personal essays out there, and I would encourage you to look at the lists that the Florida Literacy Coalition always puts out in relation to its essay book. And those are great topics for students to write on because they're very, very meaningful to them. And I've never seen a topic that hasn't engendered some interest and desire to write. And you'll see, for those of you who haven't yet seen the essay book that Florida Literacy Coalition puts out, it's amazing the kind of writing that students generate in relation to those topics. I want to share with you a little bit about poetry because I don't think we do it enough in the classroom. I think we're, for good reason, focused on the GED essay test, and we are focused on, prose writing, evidence-based writing, but poetry writing can really develop vocabulary, develop fluency, and give students an opportunity to express themselves. Again, that can be very freeing for them. One of the activities that's in the curriculum is a goal-setting advice poem. I have them read the poem Mother to Son by Langston Hughes, and I have them read poems that other students have written called Parent to Child, and then to write an advice poem about goal setting. I ask them to either write as if they're writing to a child, to their child if they're a parent, to their niece or nephew, cousin, brother, to give them wisdom on setting goals. And they've read a couple of poems by then, so they are not going to feel intimidated because they'll get a sense of what those poems can look like. And we talk, this is a great time to talk about metaphor. Life is a road, life is a bridge, whatever metaphor. In the case of Langston Hughes, life ain't been no crystal stair is the metaphor that he uses. Here's some examples of poems that students wrote to the prompt, give advice about taking care of children. Again, this is in the parenting section of the curriculum. Students come up with their own advice on what it is to be a good father, a good mother. The one at the bottom is always sad to me whenever I read it, what I wanted my father to be like. I would have really liked for my father to be around a little more. My mother had to raise me, which was not a problem, but a boy needs a good father figure. But in my case, my father never cared about nobody but himself. And you can see this is very personal, very poetic as opposed to essay-like, but I think there's some catharsis in writing these kinds of poems and then sharing them with others. And then it's freeing for those who read it to be more expressive as well. Goal setting poem, one step at a time. Life is like a staircase. Take one step at a time. Be watchful of your surroundings and always stay in stride. Stay in school and get your education, and don't mess around with crime and hate. Set your eyes on the higher prize and don't waste your time hanging with fools. I love this one. Students love these kinds of poems because they speak to them. They've come from other students and they speak to them. So having your students share with each other is very, very powerful. They always clap in my class and say, you go, you're great, and give each other lots of encouragement. And then, of course, I will hang their poems on the wall or on the board and remind them every day when they walk in that they are writers. Another thing that I've done that I would be interested to know if anybody has tried this and what your experience was like, when we're back in the classroom and when, well, actually, this would be, I didn't do it in the last 2 months, but this would be a great thing to do virtually, would be to encourage students to pick a topic. It could be a history presentation where they pick a topic in American history. It could be a biography of a famous person. It could be a PowerPoint presentation about a place, a geography presentation. Have them do the researching, the summarizing and paraphrasing, and then organizing it into a PowerPoint, editing and revising and presenting. These are very authentic, really important life skills, but they're done in order to teach others. So I would say teaching, and a lot of our students, I will say, especially our younger students, will know how to make a PowerPoint. Those who don't, I actually think somewhere I have a PowerPoint about how to make a PowerPoint that I would be happy to share if that's something that you would find useful. Or it might be something that would be easy enough to teach over Zoom. And students could share their PowerPoint presentations with each other in a Zoom call. That would be really fun. Students love this. Like I say, I haven't done it virtually, but when we're all in a room, computer lab, and presenting PowerPoints to each other, it's like a party. They're so excited to show their images up on the big screen and to read and share and teach, and then we celebrate. Let me check my time here. So we are, we're talking about all the different ways that writing is both going to teach us the skills we need, teach our students the skills that they need in order to pass the test. Both the editing and revising section of the TABE, but also the editing, revising, and actual writing sections of the GED. So writing about topics that are relevant, like how to change the world, are things that really, really draw our students' attention. So I had students write about when there had been a wave of really tragic gun violence, young people who had been killed by other young people. We did a lot of reading about newspaper articles on the topic, and then we brainstormed together how are we going to break this chain. And students, if we were all together in person, I'd show you some of the writing that they did, and it was just beautiful and heartfelt. We've written about topics like how to stop smoking, whether or not there should be budget cuts to education when our Governor Rick Scott was proposing budget cuts to education. We read about that. Students expressed their opinions and wrote essays on that topic. Decriminalization of marijuana was very relevant a few years ago. It was all in the news, and so students wrote their opinions about that. Once they've written their opinion, that's a great opportunity for you to encourage them to share. So we've had a lot of success writing letters to the editor. I cannot tell you how thrilled students are to see their words in print. Unfortunately, now most of the letters that newspapers print are online. It's still exciting for them to see. It's not quite the same as opening up a newspaper where their letter is printed. So this girl felt like marijuana should be a criminal charge, and she wrote a strong opinion to support that and was thrilled to see it published. Let's see, and this girl, this young woman, agreed with the commissioner, who believed that the pot ordinance should be a little bit looser and that the fines shouldn't be so great. And she, again, this is a great opportunity to support your point of view with evidence and reasons to back it up. I think I was going to ask for, I think I meant to ask for questions at this point. So let's do that here, just because I think there are a couple people who have entered questions in the chat or comments. Anything you all would like to share at this point?
Anyone who'd like to ask questions for Anne, go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I would like to remind you all that when you put something into the chat, please click the drop-down box where it says all panelists and click all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your chats. And we don't have any questions at the moment. We have some comments from the chat though that I'd be happy to read out. Not only is it absolutely good for everyone in regards to the essay book, not only is it absolutely good for everyone, adults enjoyed being published and seeing their name in print as an accomplishment. It's exciting to see their excitement.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
and then we have another, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We have another comment here. So absolutely, my students, inmates, were given a state to research, provide certain things as the capital, the state bird, the national or man-made attractions, etc. They did a PowerPoint presentation and presented. They as well as I enjoyed them. Again, they like to succeed and see their accomplishments. Sometimes we made it competitive.
That's a beautiful idea. That's wonderful. And when the teacher says inmates, I assume that means that they were able to use computers and access PowerPoint as a tool, and that's just fabulous. I just think that's a very, very empowering, and it's a great life skill. I would tell them to put it on a resume that they know how to create PowerPoints and whatever other computer literacy they have, because it's a presentation skill, both to present it in a really, organized and cohesive and attractive way, but also to know how to share that in front of a group. So kudos, that's great. I love the geography idea.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here, Anne. Have you ever used pictures as prompts? Have you ever used pictures as prompts? My ESOL students enjoy that activity.
Yeah, great. I think it's a great idea. I have cut out pictures from magazines, which I imagine is similar. You could use any photos, put them in a pile in the middle of a table and ask them to go through the pictures and look at them and describe. This is a great activity to use to practice descriptive language. Ask them to use sensual, sensory, adjectives, descriptive language to describe what's happening in the picture. You could use a picture as a springboard for short stories or poems. If you were there, what would you be feeling and thinking and doing in that picture? So any other ideas that this teacher has, I'd love to hear, but I think it's a very fun way, especially, for people who might be a little intimidated or who haven't done a lot of writing. There's something about cueing into the visual that can be an opening for people. So that's a fabulous idea.
All right, we have one more question.
Okay.
What about writing in home language for students with intermediate verbal skills, but whose written English is very limited?
I am going to defer that question to people with more expertise in ESOL, because that's a really good question. I would guess that writing in your home language could be very freeing, and then using that as a springboard for then translating those ideas into English. But I don't know enough about it to give an educated response to that. So if anybody else who's an ESOL teacher has more experience with that, I think that's a very interesting question. So I think it's a good question. In other words, I don't really know the answer to that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nicole, from your experience with ESOL or anybody else?
I'm not super qualified to address
Yeah,
that one, but we
no,
do actually have, we do
that's
have
a good
some
one.
ESOL, yeah, we have some ESOL webinars on our website, so I can actually include that into the chat, our list of webinars that people
Great,
who have done some ESOL specific webinars for us.
great, great, great. I know, because the thing is, thank you. I think it's a huge achievement for a non-native English speaker to try to express their thoughts and feelings in a different language. I mean, I know for myself how challenging that would be. So if, you know, to maybe you've got 2 pages of a journal and 1 page you write in your home language just to kind of get all those thoughts and feelings out in a real fluent way, and then use that as a springboard for trying to express those thoughts in English. I don't know, but it's a really interesting question, and and I'm sure it's a challenge. So that when we read the essays that ESOL students have written in our essay book, I think we have to be especially excited and proud of them for that accomplishment, because it's a real challenge. Great question. So we talk about publishing, wonderful way of bragging on and sharing student writing. I think there has not been a semester that's gone by that I haven't collected all the student writing, whether it's book summaries or responses to quotes or responses to prompts or letters to the editor, any writing that students have done in the class that I haven't collected and put into an anthology. Now, I was going to try to show pictures of my anthologies, but I could not figure out how to do it. And if we were in person, I would show you the books, because they're pretty sweet. I just used print the student writing out on, you know, I used pretty font for the headings. Each essay takes up a page. Just photocopy them and have a nice looking colored copy for the cover, and I staple the books. I mean, very simple, but students are thrilled with the books. So around holiday time, we might have an end of the year party where students we almost always have an end of the year party where students receive copies of their books. I encourage them to read an essay that they select from the book to the whole group, and then we celebrate, you know, with food and games and goodies. But it's a way of showcasing all the writing that they've done over the course of the semester. And then we do the same thing at the end of the spring semester. We just have a big celebration of their publication. So we've had a book called A Special Place, where lots and lots of writing about a place that was special to them. And there's a lot of descriptive writing. We did a whole book on words of wisdom, where they each chose a quote and wrote essays about those quotes and their thoughts. Food for Thought had all kinds of, that was the one where they shared recipes, and then they wrote about the memories that they had of food related to those recipes. Eating Right, Feeling Good, we had a garden at one point, and then we did some cooking of collards and other things from the garden, and we did lots of writing about that whole experience. What I'm thankful for could be a great topic, and I have lots of others. But I'm sure you can come up with, you know, titles for a collection of student writing, and I can't say enough about how fun that is. And the essays that go into those anthologies are often the essays that they then submit to the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book. So again, the beauty of authentic writing is that it's a way of teaching for English language learning, GED, and TABE test. Because in order to publish student writing, to share it with others, it has to involve the writing process. Students begin by doing very rough writing in their journals, and then they might write a first draft. Then we're going to ask them to type their drafts. We want to have access to computers for all our students so they can type them. And then that's where the work often comes in, is helping them have a clear introduction so that every sentence is complete. So that if their sentences are kind of basic and short, how can we embellish those and make them more interesting and use more diverse vocabulary so there's not a lot of repetition. You can do all kinds of practice with this, obviously, in class, where you have a model essay that's written with mistakes, and then as a whole class you could practice, how do I make sure I've fixed all the capital letters, all the periods, all the punctuation. How can I make the word stronger and use synonyms instead of using the word nice or the word good 50 times? What other words could I use to be more descriptive? How can I organize my paragraphs in a clear way? So all the teaching that you do to teach writing anyway can be used to do a better job of, used to help them do a better job of publishing authentic writing. So it's all of a piece. And of course, this is just a reiteration of what we were just saying. They're checking for spelling, capitalization, punctuation, run-on sentences, fragments, using crisp verbs, using pronouns correctly, even things like indenting paragraphs, organizing their paragraphs. These are all related to the GED essay test and any essay writing that they're ever going to be doing, so they're practicing for that. And then, I already mentioned this, but then we have a party. Because it's one of the more exciting things, and it's very motivating too, knowing that by December 15th, you need to all get me all of your book summaries, your poems, your quote responses, your descriptive writing. And we've been working on it over the course of all those months. But here's your deadline so that we can publish it in a book. It's much more motivating if there's a publication party where they know they're going to get the book and they're going to celebrate with food, than it is if I just said, go ahead and write your essay and then we're done, which is often what happens in traditional school. You write in order for the teacher to read it and to get a grade. In this case, you're writing for other students to read it, to have it published in a book, and to celebrate with the party. I've mentioned this a couple times. A number of you have mentioned how beautiful the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book is as a way of motivating and encouraging students. The last one just came out in May. It'll be up on the website, and I'm sure we'll all get emails next semester about the timing of how to prepare for it. It's a very easy process of uploading student writing onto the FLC website, and it's also a great computer literacy skill for them to go online and upload their edited and revised essays onto the FLC website in order to have it published in the book. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but I would love to hear more thoughts from teachers about this new strange time that we're in, where we're learning remotely and digitally. I think we can still have students do a lot of authentic writing and have them share it with each other, whether it's PowerPoints or screen sharing on Zoom or by email with each other. But I'd love to hear any other thoughts that teachers have about how we can do this during this strange time. The other thing I haven't done enough of myself, but I would love to do more is, and I'd love to hear if other people have been doing this, is getting students to be able to publish their work online. There are quite a few resources out there for Teen Ink is one of the more well-known ones, I think, where they have submission guidelines, and then students can submit their narratives or their fiction or their poetry and have it published online, which would be super fun. Scholastic has a magazine called Having Your Say. There's something called Canvas Literary Journal, which is specifically for teenagers. So if you're working with younger adults, and same with Telling Room is also focused on grade school, but also teenagers. Any other ideas or resources that people have or have used for publishing student writing online, or any other kind? Of course, there are regular literary journals that students could access as well that you can find online. Any other thoughts or suggestions at this point? Have there been some comments in the chat box, Nicole?
Yeah, we have someone's wondering if anyone has published the work of incarcerated students, any contact or best practices for this. So anyone I know we get a lot of essays already done from corrections. So if anyone here is from correctional settings, if you could type in the chat box and post it to all attendees, what the best practices you have for that, or Anne as well.
Okay. I'll make a comment quickly, which is you can do the exact same thing. I mean, if they have access to a computer, they can type their essays. And as a teacher, if you get permission from the institution, probably have to bind it differently. Probably can't use staples, but you can certainly have students share their writing with each other. And yes, if you're in corrections, you can submit students writing to the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book, because I know, because I've done it many times. You can have a institution sanctioned party for their publication. I would say just do it, do the same thing. Obviously following whatever rules you have to follow, but you have a writing workshop where students sit in a circle and share what they've written with each other, and then compile those for them to keep if possible. Definitely have them send into the essay book contest, because it's very empowering for them then to see their writing, and it's especially motivating for other people in correctional settings to read then the book and read what other people have been going through, because it's just motivating, encouraging, empowering to know that other people have been going through similar things and have wisdom to share. But I wonder if anybody else has thoughts about that.
All right, we have Anna Schubarth is with corrections, and she had a comment here that one of her correctional students was published in the essay book, and they must have permission from the central office before sending submissions. And then we have some more here. For Florida State Correctional Institutions, educators must have written permission before submitting.
Okay.
We have some more. We have another question here. Do you use peer editing in your class?
Yes, absolutely. It's a mixed bag. I mean, there are sometimes when I find the most successful experience is to literally sit next to a student while they're in front of the computer and edit with them line by line. So that's one way to do it. But another is for them to sit next to another student and swap papers and have them, especially if you've just taught a lesson, let's say in capital letters, or you've taught a lesson in descriptive writing and using adjectives, and then ask them to comment on the other students' writing with those particular lessons in mind. They can do generic editing, everything they see, they can write a comment and then share it with their partner, or you can target it and have them look at each other's writing just for that specific thing that you've just taught, because that's very reinforcing. we do editing sometimes in a larger group. So you might project student writing up onto the board if they're willing, obviously. And then as a class, we could all discuss what we like about it, what's great about it, and what capital letters we missed, and what spelling we might correct, and any other word suggestions people have. And if everybody does it, it can be kind of freeing and like, oh, I'm not being picked on. We're just all helping each other. So I think it's a great idea, and would also love to hear other things that people have done with peer editing. I know that there are lots of templates out there of peer editing checklists that you can use. All you do is type in peer editing checklist free, and there are all kinds of, through Scholastic and some of these other teacher websites, good handouts that you could use that can guide the editing process. So it's a whole list of, does every sentence start with a capital letter? Does every sentence end with punctuation? And those kinds of questions, so that the editors have something to actually work on while they're editing each other's work. Anything
Okay, that's
else?
all we have for questions right now.
Great, thank you. Well, I think I'm a little short on time, but I did want to remind people that, first of all, this is my email address, and I would love if you have either any questions, or if there's something in particular you're looking for that I could share with you, to please reach out and get in touch. And I wanted to remind you that many of these activities, especially poetry and narrative writing and responsive writing, are in our curriculum. If you take some time and kind of scroll through, we have 20, probably 35 units if you count some of the subunits, and there's a lot in there that's designed to be used in the classroom. It can be easily used in correction settings because it's reproducible and printable, and free, and you'll find all kinds of great writing activities in there. Oops. Go back. So that's what I have to share. I could talk forever about this topic because I'm very passionate about it, and would love to hear again any comments or questions or ideas that others folks have who have tried to do this in the classroom.
We do have another comment here. So my students who are inmates handwrite their essays. I review their essay with them. Then they type them using computers. They're asked to read fellow students' essays. Some do, others are more private. There has not been any requirements from the jail to submit. So this is just a little bit of a different setting than.
Yeah, nice. And you may be in a situation where you don't have access to computers. I know that hopefully most correctional institutions do allow students to use computers in a GED classroom. But even if you don't, I think you can still have students write by hand and read out loud what they've written to each other. If you had enough time during planning for you to type it up yourself and then share, I would encourage that as well, even though it certainly is better for them to have access to computers. There's so many more skills that they can learn in terms of editing. And it's, of course, they're easier and cleaner and to read when they share with each other. But that's great. That's great what this person just described. Having students write and share. And yes, sometimes people are going to be very, very open to reading out loud and sharing what they've written. And sometimes they're not. And I make it clear that that really is an individual choice. We don't want to ever put anybody on the spot or make them feel uncomfortable. Since we have a minute, I will share a story. I have a student, his essay was actually published in the most recent essay book. This is a student who was abused as a child. He was in a number of different foster care situations, different relatives kind of balance. He had a really, really rough childhood. He was a very reticent, quiet student who didn't do very much work at all. And I really had a hard time figuring out what the trick was to get him interested. Fortunately, he came every day because his grandmother made him come, but otherwise he didn't really do very much at all. Nice kid, but very quiet and very resistant to doing the schoolwork. Finally, one day he turned to the computers at the back of my room and he said, "What are those for?" And I said, "Well, at some point I'm going to be asking you all to write essays, and one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is write their autobiography." And he said, "I'll do that." He went over to the computer, didn't speak another word for the rest of the day, and typed 2 single-spaced pages. He said, "This is my life story." It was one of the more sad and moving stories that I've ever written, that I've ever read, that my students have written. He actually wanted to share it with the class. He immediately got very, very powerful feedback from other students who were deeply compassionate and respectful of what he was reading, and they were encouraging, and they said, "Thank you for sharing." He then proceeded to want to read that same essay every single time we had a new student come into the class, and we had this rolling enrollment. He asked if he could read that essay out loud. And I think it was writing therapy. I think that it was his way of dealing with all of the stressors and traumas. And a couple of students actually used the word trauma. He then started using the word trauma to describe what he had been through. And I think it was the writing that enabled him to begin to face those experiences that were so painful for him. So I can't say enough about, they're not all of our students have had such difficult life experiences or need quite the same level of catharsis. Some of them like to write about going to the beach, but for this young man in particular, it was a very, very powerful experience. And that brings me to Unit 19 of this GED Life Skills curriculum that I have posted up here is called Writing Your Autobiography. I would bring it up to show you, but I don't actually know that I can do that without messing up. But if you go to Unit 19, called Writing Your Autobiography, there are lots and lots of great suggestions for getting students to write autobiography poems, biography poems of famous people, and then there's a 20-page workbook on writing your autobiography. So that's a great place for students to, I print it out and give it to them and encourage them to handwrite on it, and then they can type it, or they can go straight to typing and telling their life story. And that for some students has been exactly what they needed and wanted to do. And he's an example of that.
Hey, Anne, we do have an additional question. Okay. Yeah, we have an additional question here. We have somebody referring back to the book that you said was published at the end of your class, and she was just wondering how it was funded.
It was never a question of funding because I just made photocopies on our copier, and because I only have about 14 or 15 students, I just went ahead and made copies. I also made a couple additional copies for administration, just to brag on the students. But in our case, that wasn't a problem. I would say, depending on your copying situation, maybe it's a matter of just asking permission to make that many copies. Otherwise, I never took it to a publisher. A printer rather. So actually, getting a voucher to get something printed has never been an issue. Anybody else do that? Like actually taking it to a printer, or had to get funding in order to publish? That's a great question.
I will add that it does not cost anything to submit them to the Florida Literacy Essay Book. So that is paid through the Florida Department of Education, but of course they have to go through the process.
Well, and the other thing that's great is then they get a copy of the book. So this, that Florida Literacy Coalition sends to us, it's just a great setup. This young man that I just mentioned, he not only got his essay published in the anthology, the stapled version that I put together, but it was also published in the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book. I think he texted me every other day, when are you bringing me my book? And when I finally got the copies mailed to me and I had all of our anthology printed, because we can't see each other in person, I went over to his house and dropped it off 6 feet away. He was so excited and he couldn't wait to show his grandmother. And that, I have to say, is not rare. Over and over again, students are just thrilled to see their work in writing and to share with their family members. Or to come back a couple of years later and say, remember this essay that I wrote? And I usually don't remember, but they remind me. And it's just very empowering and fun.
Okay, and that's all we have for questions.
Well, thank you everybody very much. I strongly encourage you to try some of these ideas, whether it's encouraging students to write letters to the editor that they see published, or whether it's to create PowerPoints that they share with each other, or poems that they then put on a little poetry presentation, or sharing their essays. All of these things are ways for students to practice all the skills that they need to be successful in terms of getting a high school diploma and preparing them for college if that's their choice. But they're also ways for them to be really comfortable with and competent with the writing process in a way that's authentic and meaningful. Please feel free to reach out to me, even if it's just to share something exciting that you have tried, that that you want to brag about yourself or your students, or if you have any questions or comments, or if there's anything that you see in our curriculum that you liked, or any suggestions you have for things that we might add, that would be fabulous. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Nicole.
Yes, thank you so much, Anne, for doing this session for us, and thank you all for joining us today. I do want to give you guys a quick reminder. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation that will pop up after you leave the session. Also, I put in the Google Drive link in the chat where you can find the presentation and also the additional handouts. So please don't forget to grab that link before you go. We will be sharing all the handouts, of course, after the fact as well. We'll circulate an email. Thank you guys again. Don't forget to look on the portal to participate in the forum discussions and the silent auction. So thank you and have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye-bye. Thanks.